Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pave It Forward podcast. My name is Phil Metzger, and with me is Kevin Gray, and we are here to help leaders in the paving industry who are looking to run more efficiently and meet their ideal customer and improve the lives of those around them through meaningful work. Kevin, how are we today, man?
I'm good, man. We had a long day yesterday. I think it was about a 17-hour shift, which I haven't had one of those in a while. It was about 95 degrees, and yeah, the humidity in that, I think the heat index was north of 100. So we gave the guys a little blow today to kind of catch their wind, and we'll get back at it tomorrow, Thursday, and God willing on Friday. So I'm
Yeah.
good, man. I'm good. I'm getting caught up on some office work, getting some bids out, getting some jobs scoped, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
That's always exciting for me, man.
Yeah, glad you made it through the day yesterday. And so it was really interesting kind of going through and analyzing what properties managers and facilities managers kind of deal with. We were looking into how to solve some of their pain points. And so this is a topic that kind of came up when we were talking and discussing a list kind of that we could put together of ways that they can go about creating a good budget, a good plan for some of these commercial projects. And so we thought we would kind of start there with understanding the scope of work, understanding what even a project scope of work is. I guarantee you that a lot of these properties managers and facilities managers will get quite a difference in what these scopes actually look like. And I'm sure, depending on how long you've been in the industry and how many of these projects you've actually done, these could look and sound a little bit differently. But just kind of in the scope of asphalt paving, in the context of asphalt paving, how do you describe kind of a scope of work when someone either asks you for one or asks you what you all provide in one?
Over my career, and over time, it's become more and more and more evident how important this piece of of our industry is, because the scopes are basically it outlines the tasks, the deliverables, and the requirements needed for executing the project. It sets the boundaries and expectations for the projects. And I didn't understand a lot of this early on in my career. I was just out, very reactive to leads or sales calls, appointments that got set for me. That's what I did the first couple years of my career in this industry was a lot of selling, just trying to learn and figure out our product as quickly as I could. And along with selling, I would go out with the crew and work with the crew and understand how they executed what they were doing, whether that be on the seal coating side, the preventative maintenance side, pothole filling, repair side, the paving side. And it took a lot of repetition. It took a lot of time out in the field for me to really start wrapping my arms around how to properly scope these projects. And I don't think you can get that, even in construction management school or whatever people are doing to get themselves into the construction industry. In my opinion, this is just my opinion. You could take it or leave it, but it comes from a lot of repetition. It comes from a lot of years being involved in projects, no matter how big or small, and probably most importantly, understanding the product that you're using, that you're selling, that you're providing, that you're trying to create solutions for these customers, and understanding what it is you're looking at when they, say, "Hey, I need you to come look at my parking lot. I need you to come look at my driveway. I need it fixed." They don't know what the solution is. They don't, 9 times out of 10, they don't know how to scope it. And they're relying on your expertise and your wisdom and your experience to provide a thorough scope. And I think not just in our industry, but in a lot of the construction trades, as an industry as a whole, I think that's where we start getting a bad rap sometimes, because you got people out there that aren't qualified, that don't have the experience, that don't have the expertise and the repetition to thoroughly assess what's going on with this pavement. We that's why we talk about the Pacer scale and start in really understanding some of these defects, because a lot of the times we don't have we or the customer don't have the resources to necessarily core drill or get down into the sub base of the issue a lot of the time. So we're relying on a seasoned eye to be able to look at a parking lot or a facility as a whole and put together the pieces of the puzzle exactly what's going on underneath of the pavement. You know, it's very, very few times is what's going on to cause the failure, deterioration, or the problem areas within a parking lot or driveway, whatever, necessarily happening even from the surface, what the eye can see. So it's understanding over time, seeing, well, if I see block cracking, this is going on. If I see longitudinal cracking, this is going on. If I see solid pavement and the sealer's just wearing off of it, I know this is going, that's just normal, good constructed pavement that's got quite a bit of life cycle left. So it's, you've got guys and gals out there all the time that'll go. I just looked at one this morning in Frankfurt. That I wouldn't be shocked that if how I don't know how many people are going to have scope this project, probably three or four. That's pretty typical. How many of them are going to say, "Hey, we can just kind of level and wedge and fix, some of these low lying and damaged areas?" Where I'm coming in there and saying we need to do a 5-inch mill and start back at the rock stone base on this one because it's shot. And some people go in and just seal coat that stuff, and then it
Yeah.
gives the whole industry a bad name because the customer, they don't know any different. Someone goes in there, sells them $10,000 worth of seal coat that lasts 6 months, and the customers there wondering, why isn't my parking lot fixed and why is the sealer gone that I just paid 10 grand for, when someone probably could have, should have recommended a much better, long lasting, long term solution to the real issues that are going on, instead of trying to come in here and make a quick buck. So it's, it's that the scope piece is huge because there's a lot of talented people in our industry that can go out and crack seal well and seal coat well and fix potholes well, mill and patch repair well, and even start from the stone up doing a heavy duty parking lot at 6 inches, 4 inches of base, 2 inches of surface. But it's are they evaluating it correctly to begin with, from the get go, and giving these customers what they deserve, what they want, what they need?
And that's really
That's where it
interesting
all
because
starts.
yeah, because well, especially with a commercial project, a lot of times that will be I presume like some of the first material that a property or facility manager might actually see from you or your company. So when you're talking about when you started doing this and how being seasoned and understanding what's really going on has really helped over the years, can you think back to the beginning, and some of the either the things you were not doing that you should have been, or maybe some examples of just how just how those property managers, how you convey to those properties and facilities managers through a piece of paper sometimes, or how you let them know that that expertise is different, because in some situations they can be getting a $10,000 seal coat versus a $80,000 paving job, and of course, like if paper to paper, $10,000 sounds a lot better. So can you kind of give some advice or some tips on what you may do to that scope of work to let them know that you know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, and dude, early on, and I'm talking, I've been doing this almost 20 years now, and man, I don't know exactly when the light bulb started to flash, and I really started to wrap my arms around the pavement I was actually assessing was looking like, and starting to understand it. But it's 3, 4, 5 years of me selling, being out in the field, going to trade shows, talking to other industry professionals, talking to mentors, like really understanding my product. It's almost like a college education, if you want, or some kind of informal training uh, period process that you have to go through. And when we would hire salespeople, I remember it would be a 2, 3 year process for them to really even remotely starting to put their arms around what they were really selling, what they were really looking at. And I can tell you, I mean, early in my career when I was selling, I was very reactive. I was reactive to what the customer was telling me they wanted or what they needed. They called me and said, "Hey, we would like to get our driveway seal coated." And Billy Bob, who we had out here last week, said all we need to do is seal coat our driveway. So we just want a price to seal coat. And I would go out and say okay, and that would be the end of it. So and it's almost like you're chasing that comfort level with your customer that I don't want to rock the boat here. I don't want to, I just want to be apples to apples with whatever everybody else is telling them they should do, whether they were right or wrong, because I didn't have enough experience or wisdom at that time. And you can't, I don't care who you are, what you do, what your profession is. Like you cannot gain wisdom in an industry in anything in your life without the experience that comes along with it. And that's a lot of the times years of experience. And I learn stuff every day. I mean, I've milled and replaced hundreds of parking lots at this point in my career, if not thousands. And every time, even as well groomed as I've become at analyzing what needs to be done, we run into situations that require change orders. Ran into one yesterday. We assume that there's 4 inches of pavement on a commercial parking lot, and we go in and mill out 2 inches of the top of the bad and replace it. That's usually a pretty good starting point for a scope. What we didn't realize or what we didn't know was that at an inch and a half, we were going to be hitting stone. So whoever paved this lot in the first place, they didn't put 4 inches of pavement down. They put an inch and a half, and in some areas there was only an inch. So we get to cutting this parking lot out yesterday that we're assuming, all things considered, because it's what we could see from the surface when we scoped and evaluated this project, there should have been 4 inches of pavement there, and there was only an inch and a half at best in a lot of areas. So we ended up cutting it down to three. And luckily, we had a customer who we had been very proactive with on the front end. We had established great communication with, that we had coached along the process. We'd been very open, honest. We'd been very responsive, and that's a big one too. Is just really getting that line of communication and trust built with your customer, because when you run into issues that are unforeseen, when I go to them yesterday and say, hey, we're gonna, instead of 2 inches, we're gonna go down to 3 inches, get down into some good stone that we can build on top of, and we need to put an extra 50 tons, or it ended up being $6,500 or so yesterday, that I had to go and ask them for to do this project correctly. But we had been so transparent and built that relationship weeks, if not months ago, when this whole process started, that they knew they had the right guy in there doing the job, and that I wasn't trying to sell them something they didn't need, trying to upcharge them for something they didn't need. I could send pictures. I actually got one of the site managers out in the parking lot with me and said, this is what's going on when we're at 2 inches. We really need to get you some structure back to this thing if you want it to last. You're spending close to 50 grand with us today, and we don't want you calling us back in a year or two with the same problem that you've had. So it's it's it and you can't get that without doing it. You've got to have the reps, you got to have the wisdom, you got to have the experience, to be able to show up and meet with a customer that says, hey, everyone else just quoted a seal coat. The easy thing to do is just give them a bid for a seal coat. And it's sometimes pulling Mr. and Mrs. Smith outside and saying, if I seal coat this stuff, I know that's a five, six, $700 solution, but what you really need is more like a $4,000 or $5,000 solution, and you're not gonna have to worry about this for the next 20 years. Instead of calling me back 6 months from now when your sealer's gone, wondering why you literally just, you know, ran five, six, $700 down the drain.
Absolutely. Just painting some rock that's going to crumble.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right,
that's so there's the change order side of things, to where if you do have to go and actually test your scope of work to go back and alter it, it's there.
right.
There's the actual foundational piece, to where you get the best product possible. You're defining that in the scope of work. Uh, why else might a project or facilities manager find it crucial when they receive a scope of work? What all does it kind of lay out, as far as things that they should be looking at and considering and caring about?
Well, it lays out, it lays out exactly what we intend to do when we show up. So putting together a good scope, I mean, It lets them know what to do from a site preparation side. It lets them know the process, the exact process of what we're going to be doing, what kind of material we're going to be using. Are we going to be milling? Are we not going to be milling? What kind of labor is going to be involved? How many people are going to show up the day that we're doing this? So we try to paint this picture for them in a scope. So when we show up with 10 dump trucks and 15 guys and $3 million worth of equipment, they're not like, oh my God, we got to shut down our plant for the day. Like, oh yeah, we should have told you that. Well, we do tell you that. We make it very specific on what to expect, what kind of time, we not only tell you what we're going to do, but how long it's going to take. What's the realistic expectation of the disruption to your business, your facility that we're coming to basically infiltrate for the day or the couple days. Sometimes we get on these large capital projects for these big box stores. It's a 4, 5, 6, 7 day process, and we've got to be very specific on traffic patterns and disruption to business and trying to be the least disruptive that we can possibly be. So and sometimes that's not great news that you've got to share with your customer. And like when I figured that one out from a sales and scoping standpoint, that it's not all, we're in the asphalt industry, it's rock, tar, and sand. It's not glamorous, and not every project, I'm sorry, facility manager, is going to be rainbow and sunshines, because we are going to be disrupting your business to some extent. Your employees may have to park somewhere else. But our goal, if we can execute and you allow us to come in and do us what you hired to do, we're going to get in and out of here as quickly as possible. And by the way, let me understand how you operate this facility so that I can best plan how we're going to execute the logistics of this project to make this as smooth and as painless as possible. So that's what we're after. It's getting the scope right, and then it's getting with that customer, being very realistic and transparent about what's about to go down, so we can marry the two together and get in and out as seamless as possible.
Excellent. So, I suppose you might ask the properties and facilities managers just, I guess what times are available, what are the best times,
Yeah,
what are your employee counts on different days and things like
yeah,
that.
different
Is there any other
shifts.
information that a manager might have not ready for you, but that you might commonly ask a properties or facilities manager as like pre-information?
It's usually their traffic pattern, how frequently they use the lot on, and a lot of the times we'll find that some days are busier than others, or that a lot of these big facilities, it's a 2 or 3 shift deal where they've got employees coming and going, semi truck, tractor trailers coming and going 24 hours out of the day. Of course, a lot of these places, ideally, they would want us showing up on a Sunday night to do the work because, nobody's there. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that's hard to marry and us merge with either trucking or milling or getting our material on a Sunday. So Saturday evening, Sunday evening, when it would be ideal for everyone. And look, we wouldn't mind doing that at all. We want to make this as painless as possible. So if we can line up trucking and material and milling, my guys will be there. We'll pave 24 hours a day if we've got to, because that's the root of everything we sell and every job we perform starts with the customer first. And it has to. Like we've got to figure that out first and foremost, because like I said earlier, there's plenty of qualified contractors that can come in and do similar work, provide similar quality. They know how to install and do what we do. But we want to take it a step further. We want to make that customer experience painless. We want to make it memorable. We want them to say, we dealt with these folks and they answered all of our questions before we asked them. They were well prepared. They asked the questions that helped them understand our business and what it looks like, what our busy times are, and look, that's taken me time too. As I'm having these conversations with these folks the first time I meet them, I'm kind of already asking those questions, and I'm listening. I've learned what to listen for to help guide that conversation and hear what they're telling me instead of me telling them what we're well. That's great that you're busy that day. That's when we're going to come pave. No, let's figure out a happy medium. And by the way, I'll always err to the benefit of the customer. That's just, I mean, we're I don't care what you're selling. We're in the business of serving people, serving our customers. I don't care if you're selling Big Macs at McDonald's or you're selling parking lots. Like, figure out what they need, how they want it. They want lettuce, tomato, ketchup on it. All right, let's get them that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was sitting here thinking, one about you had mentioned needing to use milling and striping, and I want to come back to how you kind of estimate those in working with other companies, but no one rarely comes out of a parking lot saying, "Man, that was a great experience driving on that fresh asphalt." You know, maybe a homeowner is really proud of their new driveway. Maybe the facilities manager is proud of the way the parking lot looks, but it's typically going to be a lot of headaches, even if things go well. So you had mentioned, listening for those key points. As far as traffic patterns and everything like that, and just being respectful and understanding what's going on in their business. But I thought that was a great point. I did want to get back to the subcontracting issue, or the
Yep.
subcontracting items, if you will. So I imagine there's not a super long turnaround on these scopes of work. Can you kind of give me an estimate on how long you might have to put a proposal together, an estimate together on a typical commercial lot?
Well, it's it's interesting. Like you would think there would be ample time to do these, and I'm not sure what happens. And I'm not look. We love our partnerships with all the national pavement companies that we work for, but I can't over the last 5 years, maybe in a decade, I don't know that I've gotten one RFP request for a proposal that hasn't said, "Hey, we need this back in 3 to 5 business days." It's like you need me to drive 2 hours away, look at this facility, scope it, possibly meet with the facilities manager, get my pictures, gather all the information I need, talk to my striping subcontractor, my milling subcontractor, my trucking subcontractor, get all their pricing back, and get this turned around for you by the end of the week. Um, but we always make it happen. Like it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Even independent, it's almost like folks kind of wait to the last minute and say, "Oh, because I don't think people are thinking about parking lots that frequently, to be honest with you. Like it's
Sure.
just one of those things that corporate says, or the president of a locally owned company says, "Hey, we got the money, the budget, the allocation for quarter 3 to do this lot. Let's get it done. By the way, let's get it done as soon as possible." So it's typically a pretty quick turnaround. And thankfully, I personally, now this is where people that haven't been doing it that long or don't have the experience or the wisdom or aren't seasoned at doing this kind of scoping and evaluation and assessment, that can get very stressful, but I've done enough of these to where I can get them turned around very quickly because I've got data, I've got the numbers, I've done thousands, put thousands of these proposals together. So and I tell you what, man, one of the biggest things because there are some, and it's usually the big producer supplier contractors that own their own plants, that own large fleets of trucks, equipment trailers, that kind of do everything in house. But most of us, smaller guy, private paving contractors across the country, we are subbing out our striping. We are subbing out our milling. We may have some dump trucks, but on these larger projects, we're probably leasing out some additional trucks to help us get the material in and out of there as quickly as possible. So you got to have great relationships with your subcontractors, and that's a trial and error period. That took me a couple years to figure out who I could really rely on and who was really going to be there when they said they were going to be there. And milling's supposed to start at 4 a.m. And they're there milling at 4 a.m. and the dump trucks are there at 4 a.m. with them. And my striping guy said we'll be done paving at 2 o'clock, and he's there at 1, ready to go. So just getting those relationships built within not only within your own organization, but with the people you rely on to execute these projects is huge,
And when you
huge.
first built in those line items for milling, we'll just take milling as the example. did you just kind of go on an average of what you were comparing the beginning to now? Specifically, did you go based on an average? Did you actually reach out to these contractors to see what they would charge for this specific job? Did you have to just guess sometimes? What was kind of the
Yeah,
approach there, beginning
in
and
the
now?
yeah, it's that's a good point. I mean, in the beginning, it was a lot of relying on them to get back to me with a price or another, so let me get their quote so I can put it into my quote. Now that I've got so much data, I know exactly what milling should cost. I know exactly what the striping should cost. I know exactly I need 6 trucks for roughly 11 hours each. Whatever, like I've got the data not only in my head through experience, but we've got almost 2 decades worth of experience that's been tracked, through our financials and on job reports and job costing and figuring out our overhead and our profit margin, just where everything needs to be. Now it's pretty simple, but over the year it wasn't always simple. That stuff took a lot of time to really wrap my arms around. Now, I went out and looked at a big capital project today that 10 years ago would have probably taken me all week to put all the pieces together. And I can probably do it in less than an hour now. That's not an ego thing. That's just a statistical. That's like a major league baseball player who was playing high school ball 10 years ago. He couldn't hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, but he can today pretty regularly because he's been doing it for, a decade. So,
Absolutely. He knows what it
that
looks like coming in there. Yeah.
he knows what it looks like. He knows where that pitch is coming out of that pitcher's hand and what pitch that's likely going to be. So I've I've learned enough lessons. I've screwed up enough, struck out enough, if you will, to just have some familiarity with how to get these things done. And so now that for me has become the easiest part. The more difficult part, or the more, not even the more difficult, but the more important part to for me today is educating the customer, being transparent with the customer, figuring out what's important to them, and being able to execute at a high level. The
Absolutely.
rest of the stuff is just the stuff we do.
Absolutely. And just to know that, this is a life cycle product. You can
Yes.
be their dependable partner for the entire life cycle. And uh, I'm sure that they know more properties and facilities managers. And whether you do a good job or not, I'm sure they're willing to tell their other friends about how the project went.
Yeah.
When you're building out some of these light items, and I was thinking about the material cost specifically in these scopes. Um, is there, I mean, obviously you can be dealing with giant parking lots, and when you talk about the difference of a half an inch over 100,000 square feet or something like that, your prices can be way off. Do you have any kind of advice when it comes to uh putting the estimate for the material together, whether it be kind of covering your ass when it comes to making sure you have enough, or just tips when it comes to making sure that you can keep that client happy while also putting a little money in your pocket?
Well, again, you've got to have the historical data to understand. You've got to you develop an eye for, typically, hopefully, when you do, let's say, a 2-inch mill and overlay, you're milling a pretty consistent 2 inches across that parking lot, and that's what you're putting back. I'll usually factor, depending on how big the job is. I know just from experience that I might want to account for a truckload, maybe two, of leveling or wedging just to get this parking lot back to a really, really good grade before we pave it, because maybe there's some potholes in there that are going to be a little lower, or the mill is going to hit a spot that we don't get exactly perfect. So, maybe there's I don't know, 3 to 5% overage that you want to build into there. And I'm glad you brought up the thickness point, because that's something that I really want to stress, probably more to our consumer than anything, to these property managers, facility managers, business owners that have parking lots. If you're getting, and most of these folks, they'll get at least 3 bids. A lot of them get up to 5 bids. They're having 3 to 5 until they've found someone that they can trust over and over and over and over again, like I can with our subcontractors. They're going to look at every project and have 3, 4 companies, scope it, give their opinion. If you see similar and or same scopes and you're seeing the price, the big, I'm talking even 15, 20%, but you're seeing a 15 to 30% difference in price and someone's extremely low, you might want to ask them if they're willing to provide load tickets when they're done, because when they're done with the job, because there's really labor usually ends up being pretty inexpensive, at least line for line on these larger projects. It usually comes down to your material. So if somebody's way off, way under, I can almost guarantee you with all the history I've got that they're cheating you somewhere on the material. And in our industry, unless you're out there coring this job, as I would highly recommend you, if you're spending $250,000 on a parking lot, let's put some coring into this and make sure I'm giving you the 4 inches I promised you I was giving you. Because if somebody comes in here and is only giving you three over 100,000 square feet, that's a big difference. That's a huge difference. And most consumers aren't going to know that when they're done. And by the way, most times that parking lot's going to perform pretty well for quite some time, and they're not going to realize that it's failing too soon until they get into year 12, 15, 18, when it should have lasted 25. So they might not even know who they did business with by that point. It's probably a different facility manager. And that guy's cashed the check and gone on down the road and bought a boat or whatever, So it's if you those are some of the red flags to look at. If you're a consumer and you're getting multiple bids and you got a guy or two that's way out of the ballpark of everybody else. So, and I try to be that transparent with customers on the front end and let them know, say I'm probably not going to be the cheapest. I'm going to do my best to give you the very best product you can expect from someone in our industry. And by the way, if you I know price can be a factor a lot of times. If just a heads up, customer, if you see someone or two come in here extremely lower than everyone else, then that I'm not talking bad about anyone, but that could be a red flag to just have them check their numbers or call myself to just, and I'll give them an honest opinion on what I think might be going on. So whether I get the job or not, I want to be educating the consumers that are using our industry's products.
Sure. And when you're bringing up the techniques and measures to check your performance and core sample and do whatever needs to be done to maintain that relationship, that extra effort, service, value does, typically cost a little bit more no matter what industry you're in if you're trying to get a reliable product. Um,
Yep.
so is there
You can
anything?
you can you can usually ward off the people that are in there trying to screw you over if you just simply ask them to write in their contract that they will provide load tickets upon completion of the project, like proving that they use that much material. It should use this much material for this scope of work, and this is how much material we used. That's the asphalt plant verifying that. So that's nothing I can forge or fabricate, document on my own. That's coming from the source where I'm getting the material, and every pound of it is on your parking lot.
Yep.
And
And
just see how many of those folks may say they're either not willing to do that or you don't hear back from
that
them. Like
is
that's a good one.
that's excellent. Even because I mean, yeah, the asphalt plant wants their money. They're not going to short you anything on that receipt. They're gonna
That's
they're
right.
gonna make
Yeah,
sure you
that's
pay every
exactly
cent
right.
for every little rock you use. So,
Yeah.
uh, that's a pretty killer little tip there. As far as you had mentioned that labor was pretty much or I'm sorry, that the materials was one of the bigger costs, if not the biggest cost on the line item. The only two kind of notes I had here were for equipment and labor was the other one is just as far as line items to go over and speak with you. When
Yep.
I bring up equipment or labor, is there anything that strikes you as wise to do if either of those line items should become questionable or need some advice on those line items for the scope?
No, I mean just this is for the contractors out there. It's understanding how much your labor costs are, with benefits included and matching taxes and all the fringe things that come along with it, and understanding how long, really estimating how many hours you're going to have your crew out there. Like and that only comes with experience. And wisdom of doing it over and over and over and collecting that job data and saying if we run into these variables or a job looks like this or the layout's like that or we have to pave it this way instead of that way, that's going to take us more time or that's going to take us less time. And really, I mean, you get to estimating these jobs, like I want to get as close to the actual how many hours it's going to take us to do it as I possibly can. If I'm way off there or way under there, I'm either overbidding the project or I'm paying for a lot of free labor that I didn't charge the customer for. And I've done both, by the way. Trust me, multiple times. So understanding how the production rates of your crew of your equipment, how it all syncs together. You've only got so many man hours per season. You've got to know what every piece of equipment that you intend to have on that job site is going to cost you per hour. You take their payments into consideration, their fuel, their maintenance, the insurance on them, all those things, and factor an hourly cost for each piece of equipment that you're going to use on that job. So if I say I'm going to have 20 man hours in there, it's going to take us 20 hours to complete. I know I've got my labor accounted for. I've got to charge 20 hours of that paver that's going to be out there also, or that skid steer, or these dump trucks. Like that stuff doesn't pay for itself. And I think a lot of people miss that piece and they get to the end of the year and they're questioning like where is the profit? Like you might be charging for that labor or that equipment, but are you charging for the overhead involved with that labor and equipment? And then not only that overhead, but the overhead of running the business for an entire season as well. All the other things that aren't directly related to that job site. Your marketing, your telephones, your insurance, your rent, your utilities. I mean, your car, your non-production payments you might have, and on and on and on down the list. Like that's all got to be charged to a job at the end of the day. So it's understanding all that and how it looks as a big picture when you're putting these estimates together.
Yeah, I've it's always interesting because we worked together now since 2017, and
Yeah.
it's we've talked a heck of a lot of asphalt, and I'm still learning new things through our conversations, even though we go over the notes and everything before the episodes, and I think I'm gonna have a good beat on it, but. With the advice of, you can get the core sample, but also the load tickets. It got me thinking for any new properties or facilities managers out there who haven't had chances to take on a lot of these projects yet, who may even be facing new scopes of work or scopes of work for asphalt paving. Are there any other kind of things just to kind of even if it's tips to questions to ask or things to look for within a company that you're choosing or other things on other line items that may send up a red flag? Is there anything for someone new in that kind of position that maybe is just now taking on their first scope? Is there any advice that you might want to give them other than those load tickets?
I'd say, I mean, a great free resource, and we mentioned it in very early on in this episode was, and I was talking, for contractors to get familiar with it, but that Pazer manual, that PASER
Hmm.
manual that has been published and put out for our industry. I mean, my my 7-year-old could probably read through that and look, and there's pictures associated with a scale of 1 to 10. How is your pavement performing and what kind of condition it's in? Like you can really understand what you're dealing with before you even get a contractor involved. So it's a great piece of education that something that you can do on your own to really, because if you're a facilities manager, that's a big task. You've got to understand HVAC, you've got to understand plumbing, you've got to understand electrical, you got to understand windows, you got to understand roofing. Typically the parking lot and concrete is probably one of the last things you're thinking about because it's on the exterior of the building. A lot of these um, things are internal or more on the inside when it comes to maintenance and managing a facility. And those things outside, like the grass and the weeds and the parking lot and things like that kind of, but that is a tremendous resource to help you understand your pavement in a very quick fashion with no real background of the industry. Something you can read, and the pictures are so good explaining exactly what's going on that you can get a good understanding. And then by the way, if you've done your homework there, you know which contractors are aligning with reality or not, and who's blowing smoke and who's out to get a quick buck, or who's just following the direct, I think I need to get my parking lot seal coated, so they show up and that's what they give you a price for, when that's not even close to what it really needs.
Not even assessing, just telling
Yeah,
you what you
just
want to hear, being a
totally
yes
reactive.
man.
So yeah, play a little offense, facility manager. Like do a little bit of your own homework, because it's out there and it's quick and it's easy.
Sure,
Like there's
sure.
no reason in today's world. Um, and look, that's another thing. Like I, there's no reason that the consumer shouldn't already be somewhat educated on what they're getting into before they get into it. And that's part of the reason we do these podcasts, is to share information and to teach and to educate and learn. I learn or remind myself of things every time we sit down and talk about this stuff. Like this is great for me to be having these conversations out loud too, man, because it's just a piece of continuing education for myself. Like if I want to be the best, I need to figure out how to be the best and what that looks like. Continue
Absolutely.
to deliver on that, and not rest on my laurels just because I've been doing it for almost 20 years. Like that, what have you done for me lately? Like nobody gives a shit about what I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. What are you going to do for me on this on your next project? Let's talk
Absolutely.
about that, because that's what we're talking about, right?
Hopefully do well enough to talk about you and bring you up
Right,
and
yeah.
have you at the forefront of your mind every time that asphalt comes up.
Word of mouth still wins, man.
Absolutely.
I don't care what form of marketing you use in your own business. Word of mouth is by far the strongest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can even have a great impression in your mind, and then you talk to someone who's actually dealt with you, and they can sway you uh, very easily and with strength too.
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely put that Pazer rating in the resources. I'll link to the document so anyone out there can check that out, whether you be a property or facilities manager, business owner, or an asphalt paving maintenance technician or business owner. Uh, it's really neat to look through that and to see what the standards are, if nothing else, because different companies can say different things, and you can put whatever you want in your own material, but it's nice to have an industry standard guide that you can kind of look towards. Is
It's
there a Yeah, go
it's
ahead, go ahead.
incredible, man.
Yeah. As far as pertaining to kind of the scope of work when talking about the relationship with properties and facilities manager, is there anything that kind of popped in your brain that you wanted to kind of mention, or any last kind of tips or job examples? Is there any examples that pop into your mind maybe when you think of a job that went well or a job that went poorly, that you have any lessons to give?
Man, the jobs that have gone the absolute best in my career, and there's been a bunch of them. It really comes down to communication, man. It really comes down to communication and establishing realistic expectations, because 9 times out of 10, like I said, these even though your consumers, your facilities managers, property managers, um, they have a general understanding of what you're getting ready to come do to their property and their facility. But I'm talking about getting specific with them, like tumultuously transparent, like and tell I mean, just you got to paint the picture for them. And you got to be open, you got to be honest, you got to be realistic. You got to tell them the bad news. It took me years to convince my sales team. It's like, have these tough conversations with these people up front, because I think it builds trust, because most of our competition isn't out there telling them the harsh truth and reality. So I think it builds trust right out of the gate. And then B, they know exactly what to expect when we show up at 4 a.m. and start milling. It's not a surprise. It's not a shock. We've painted the picture for them. They know exactly what's going down. So it's like I said, plenty of people can do this stuff. but it's, how well do you relay what that stuff really looks like in the real world to your consumer? I
Awesome.
think
Thanks.
those are the best ones, because even when things go bad during a project, I and or the company or the crew are the only ones that are really feeling it. Um, the
Mhm.
consumer still sees the general picture of what you painted going on out there, and everything's fine. As long as we're on time and under budget for them, we're good. And
Yes.
when bad things happen during a job that they probably should know about, we tell them about it. If we got to call a timeout and say, hey, we just lost 2 days of production because of XYZ, we're going to talk about it now instead of just lingering around for an extra couple of days and then wondering. They said they'd be done by Thursday. It's next week now. What's going on, man? Like,
Yep. That's a way to hurt a relationship right there because uh you're trying to maintain that partnership, and obviously the communication is a key part, not only on that job but moving forward and everything else. So yeah, that's pretty killer because something, especially on these larger jobs, something's going to happen.
something
Something's
always
going
happens.
something's going to go wrong, and the comfort level that project manager, facilities manager has is due to you, that leader, and keeping it all organized, all as you said it was going to be, and trying to keep things on the tracks. So, Kevin, any last thoughts for the people today, man? I really appreciate all the advice. That felt like that was a pretty damn good episode.
No, I do too. I was excited. And I mentioned it in the intro that I was excited to talk about scope and job execution and because scope for me is is my love, almost like my love language to my customer, because it's
Yeah.
it's painting that picture for them, like it's really getting us intimately engaged, if you will. I mean, that's how I see it. So that's why I get excited, and I'm grateful that I have the experience I do, because I can get real with my customers and feel like I'm educating them on a level that they should expect from a contractor that they're getting ready to hire. And when I don't have the answer to something, because I don't always, I've got a phone book full of people I know and resources that I can call to get the answer, so I can pass that along to my consumer and I can deliver an awesome product for them. Like this is I love scoping work, because it's really where I find my passion for this industry. It's because I'm solving problems for people.
Excellent, Kev. Well, thanks as always for your time. It's been as I said, a killer episode. And if anyone out there has any specific questions for Kevin, may not be able to get you if he's right to you if he's on the job site, but feel free to reach out, ask us your questions. If nothing else, we can bring it up on a podcast. We can see how we can answer it best for you and your situation. And yeah, if you feel like keeping the party going, check us out on Instagram and YouTube at Pave It Forward LLC. As always, there's going to be more resources coming soon. We're getting some different material out there on our social media networks, so check it out. We've got some statistics and things like that we're beginning to release that are correlated with our episodes. And as always, check the show notes to see what other links and resources we have from the episode. We'll put that Pazer rating in there today. But other than that, Kev, any last thoughts for the people today?
Man, I don't. I don't.
Excellent. Well, thanks for your time, Kev. Thanks for everyone out there
Thank
for
you.
listening. Yeah, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and on Instagram. Follow along. And this has been the Pave It Forward podcast. Let us know what we can do for you, and we'll see you on the next episode.